Well, here we are, the collar mine. It's about 5 feet deep. It's about 5 feet wide, I mean, and as you can see, I'm not 5 feet tall, I'm actually 7 feet, so in this video we're going to be going in the mine, and we're going to have a tour guide. He's also really, really good, very great voice, very knowledgeable, so let's go in. Okay, so we're going to this mine. Not gonna lie, I'm a little nervous.
You'll be fine. Practice your duck walk. Grab one. Grab one, Eric.
But this is what they call a jackleg drill. This revolutionized mining underground because no longer did you need a piece of steel and a hammer to drill holes for the explosives. Now you could use compressed air. This made the job a lot easier and a lot faster, but not necessarily safer, because mining is inherently dangerous no matter what you do. Now, you're going to see two of them back there that were actually used to drill for the explosives, but those explosives were never used because this part of the mine was abandoned before they decided not to do it. So that's what you can see back there. Now, here's your trivia question of the day. What's this? I don't mean a Dr. Pepper bottle either.
Train car that you pumped in TNT with.
Okay, it was used underground.
The toilet?
You're right.
Oh.
You're absolutely correct. Now stop and think about it. They had to have them.
Yep.
You can't have all these people working underground without a place to go potty. And you couldn't bring them all the way up. So you brought the potty to them.
Nice.
These are extremely rare today. Most of them were destroyed at the beginning of World War II for scrap steel. But we own two of them, and they came from Bisbeers on them. Okay, now Pard, you're going to have to duck.
Duck.
All of you have to duck, except for these chillin', because we had to shore this mine up over the years to keep it open. But at one time it was 6 feet wide, it was 7 feet high. And just to put things in perspective for you, in 1875, 1876, every ore cart that came out of this mine contained up to 1,500 ounces gold, silver. Now you know why we were called the richest place on earth, because we were. So, let's go.
Are you gonna go potty in that thing? Don't forget.
You guys go ahead.
Yeah, why don't you guys go ahead?
I've tried to move these timbers with my head many times. It's been a lesson in futility.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. We'll let you guys go first. Like probably come back. Yeah. You taking pictures? Yeah. Oh my goodness, Eric.
No, Eric.
Wow. glad we didn't bring Jim. He would have hated this. We're coming.
Watch your head.
I'm watching, I'm watching.
There you go, honey. Stand up. There you go. Or sit down. Either way.
All right, this is what they call a stope. Now you came into a drift. We drifted with the ore vein until we came back. They found a pocket, and here's where they set up shop. Now when they came in here, as I said earlier, they didn't have the benefit of anything other than hand tools. And even in the worst parts of the mine, they still had it dug by hand. So they had a piece of steel called a jack, blunt on one end, pointed at the other, held it into the ore face, and for 8 long hours a day, drove for the explosives, because it was hard rock. And every 4 hours or so, a cart would come in and bring in sharpened steel and take out the bluntment, because that's how long it would take before it would become dull. Now, one of these days I'm not going to be able to get back up. Had a hammer, 10 pounds. Hit steel. Pound. You know, you two boys come up here and give me a hand. Come on. Now what? There's 2 rules. Rule number 1, if you hit my hand, you get stuffed in a pillowcase. Okay? Rule number 2, refer to rule number 1. Now get busy. Good. Oh, careful now. Pound. Now they had to turn the drill, because if they didn't, it would get stuck, obviously. But even more importantly, that powder monkey, when he came up, he wanted to make sure those holes were perfectly round, because when he blasted, he didn't want a big kaboom. He wanted to slice off that ore as loose as he could get it with. Come on. So if one person operated the drill, it was called a single jack. 2 people operated the drill like he and I are doing right now, called a double jack. If 3 people operated the drill, it was not called a triple jack. It was a government project. All right. Good job. All right, thanks, guys. All right, now you know what it's like to work for $4 a day. Now, for light, they couldn't bring anything into this mine that was going to give off a gas like carbon monoxide. So that eliminated any of the flammable fuels they might have had back then. And so they're pretty much restricted to a candle. So you wouldn't think offhand that a candle would give off that much light, unless you find yourself in an environment where this candle is the only thing between you and total darkness. Now, as your eyes become more accustomed to the low light, you'll be surprised how well you can see. I can make out your facial features. And obviously there's more than enough light to be able to work for this ore face. But now suppose, ladies and gentlemen, that you're in one of those mines where the temperature is 130, 135 degrees. You can't even touch the rocks because they're so hot. And to make your $4 a day even more miserable, suddenly for your $4 a day, as I said, your candle goes out. Now you can't even see your hand in front of your face because you were literally in total darkness. Now, what would cause that candle to go out on its own?
Lack of oxygen?
You're right. So you imagine your candle goes out because of lack of oxygen. And now you have to find yourself where you can find some ventilation. But as you're groping around in the dark trying to get to a station where you can get that ventilation, you take a wrong turn and you go down a mine shaft. So a very dangerous way to make a living. Now, speaking of mine shafts, this mine shaft to this mine was the only one accessible from the surface, and so everything that came into this mine had to come down through that main shaft. All the equipment, the miners, timbers, machinery, everything came down through that main shaft because it was the only one accessible to the surface. Anything else had to be dug by hand and was used either for ventilation or searching or chasing an ore vein. And so that meant that those shafts were not accessible to the surface. So with that in mind, I'm going to show you a shaft, opposed to giving you the shaft. And it's right behind you. This shaft, ladies and gentlemen, at one time was 300 feet straight down. Now it's only about 10 feet because this was abandoned in the mid-1920s. This part of the mine was. Now it's filled in over the years, caved in. A little bit of groundwater down there from underground springs, but nothing of any consequence. Accessible by a ladder, and this was used for ventilation, and it was also used because they found an ore vein down below. So the way it would work, once they got compressed air into this mine, now they didn't need that piece of steel as I showed you. And so you had these miners down below. They had to have a signal from down below to let people up here understand it was time to bring up this very large bucket.
Excited.
Oh, yeah. It's a very large, very heavy bucket. That bucket weighs about 250 pounds. Now add to that very large, very heavy bucket, 500 to 600 pounds of rock. Now you have a very large, heavy bucket. So how was it brought to this level? By this winch that you see behind me. Powered by compressed air after 1870. Now the way it would work, the winch operator would be standing by there. He had to have a signal from down below to let him know it was time to raise the very large, very heavy bucket. So there was a rope 300 feet down, and when you heard two bells, all right, Jake, bring it up. One bell, dump the ore into the ore carts, taken out of here on rails, where it was dumped into an ore tipple, where it was stored until such time there was enough to load to the railroad cars to take to the stamp mills along the Carson River. Then if you heard three bells, that meant they had to get all the way down there because they were going to lower the bucket. And if that bucket were to break loose and hit somebody down there, that would cause a major violation of the Sense of Humor Act. Now, once they got compressed air into the mines, like I said, now you could use these jack leg drills that you see here. These drills were used to drill the explosives that you see in the ore face. But they were never detonated because this part of the mine was abandoned. And they didn't want to go through the trouble of doing it because they knew they weren't going to take anything out. All right, so now, here's what the powder monkey made his money. He would come up, and when he blasted, as these youngsters showed you, he didn't want to blast out a large part of that. He just wanted to blast out just enough to get into the ore carts and get it out of here. So he would try to blast out a circle in the center of that ore face, the center like a fillet, to want a better word. So he would set those fuses, Now, when he blasted, once again, you want to hear kaboom. You want to hear each individual hole. So he knew that a foot of fuse was about 45 seconds. He would cut each fuse at a different length and then set them in the charges. Because when he blasted, he wanted to hear all those detonations in sequence. So he would set the fuses, get everybody around the corner, he'd wait and he'd say, oh, stand by, fire in a hole, 10 holes. Boom, 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 10 holes. Stop and listen, look around the corner. All clear. But every once in a while, he thought he heard 10. It's only 9. Now what is he going to do? He'd wait, listen, look around the corner, just as that 10 fuse got to the 10th hole. Boom! You know what happens after that? All the king's horses and all the king's men wouldn't be able to put him back together again. And indeed, more than 600 miners lost their lives up here due to fire, accidents, cave-ins. More than double that, miners that were maimed and couldn't work anymore. The deadliest incident occurred in April of 1869 when 38 miners lost their lives in an underground fire in the eastern extension to the Yellow Jacket mine. That fire was fed from the air vents, and from the ventilation shafts that sucked in oxygen like sucking soda pop through a straw. Of those 38 miners that perished, all but 5 were recovered, so there's still 5 entombed at the bottom of that mine. Dangerous way to make a living. Now, when they came in here, they were looking for gold. And by golly, they found it. Despite the fact they were constantly being hindered by this bluish-gray clay that when it got wet, it got very gooey, it got very sticky, and it was causing them all kinds of problems in their gold mining operation. And eventually they had pockets of this stuff laying around and piles of it, until one day somebody got curious and took some of that blue-gray stuff to Nevada City, California, and had it assayed. Boy, do I have a surprise for you. You're fine. You know, that blue-gray stuff, ladies and gentlemen, assayed at 5,000 ounces, $5,000 a ton in high-grade silver, and that's what it looks like. This is silver. Silver, ladies and gentlemen. See where the vein starts here? Goes down into that lower stope, and went all the way back to the foot of Mount Davison. Silver, that's the bluish gray you see.
Oh, wow.
Now, why did they not know what it was? Because they were used to seeing silver that was in rock. But this was a sulfide. They had not seen silver like this before. And so once they discovered what it was, oh, brother, silver.
Yeah,
Now,
go ahead.
why is it still here?
I know I'm in the way. Sorry.
Boys, you get a chance to see that?
Yeah,
Come on, Mom. You too, Mom. Come on. Silver. That's silver. Bluish gray. In the vein, came down this way, went down below to that lower slope, and went all the way back to Mount Davison. Silver. This is the silver, ladies and gentlemen. It goes into a ring that a young lady places on her finger when she gets married. The same silver that she makes into a ring to give to her husband and places it in his nose. Did I strike a nerve? So why is it still here? Anybody want to venture a guess why it's still here?
Is it maybe too expensive to get out of there?
Well, it was just too expensive. When they decided to abandon this part of the mine in 1925, they didn't blast it out because it didn't worth the effort, and they left this because it was considered low grade and wasn't worth the effort to take it out. Now, we had this assayed, and it assayed at 15 ounces of silver per ton. It's considered pretty high grade. Back then it wasn't, and so they left it. And so we have found its value is to show you it looks like an exhaust full silver. Now, I was born in the little town of Bethlehem, 4 miles from Nazareth, and that is the honest truth. I was born in Bethlehem, 4 miles from Nazareth, in the heart of the Lehigh Valley in southeastern Pennsylvania. Now, those miners had to take canaries with them inside those mines because the canaries were very sensitive to a gas called methane. Methane is a gas given off through the decaying process of animal or vegetable, and that's what coal is derived from. Well, here they didn't have that problem because this is all underground hard rock. But back there, when the methane got so high, what did the canary do? Drop dead. So here they had to have some way of knowing there was a problem in the mine. Rats. Used to feed them out of lunch boxes, give them snacks throughout the day. Now, you've heard the expression, rats leaving a sinking ship.
Yep.
Same principle. The rats could smell smoke before there was a fire. The rats could sense movement in the mine before there was a possible cave-in. And so when the rats started to scurry around in panic, what did the miners do?
Run.
Had to leave, right? Ready for this? Now be careful. Petco, $7.50. Now, Nevada is the largest producer of gold in the entire world. So why aren't we called the gold state? Well, the reason is back then, gold was $20 an ounce. Silver was only $9 an ounce, so we have that disparity. But for every ounce of gold taken out of these mines, 10 ounces of silver. Now the disparity has changed. Now you got $90 in silver to $20 in gold. That's why we're called the silver state. Now, well, let me ask these kids something. What's October 31st mean to you?
Halloween.
Halloween, right? You're going to get dressed up in a costume? You're going to go trick-or-treating? Well, we Nevadans, we look at October 31st as something different. 1864, the war between the states was going very badly for Lincoln. It was increasingly bloody, getting more and more expensive, and as a result, with no end in sight, Lincoln was in danger of losing the election. So he had to pull a rabbit out of his hat. And so on October 31st, 1864, while Congress was out of session, he makes Nevada a state, gets the 2 extra delegates, pushing them on top. That's why we're known as Battle Born on October 31st. Halloween. Any questions? So it was politics. Okay. These mines were operated quite successfully up until, well, way after the turn of the century. But by the time the mid-1920s came around, it started to depreciate quite rapidly. Still, most of these mines stayed open until the beginning of World War II. All of these mines were then shut down and sealed by the U.S. Corps of Engineers because of the Non-Essential Minerals Act, which meant only those mines that were essential to the war effort were allowed to continue. Gold and silver was excluded from that. And the year that I was born, 1945, you could have had any property up here for less than $100. That changed in 1959 because of a television program that aired from 1959 to 1973. Anybody remember what that program was? Bonanza, right. But it distorted our history. It made us seem like we were an old West cowboy town, when in reality, we were a mining empire. By 1876, Virginia City had 30,000 people living here. We had indoor plumbing, centralized heating, electricity, and the International Hotel was known for its elegance throughout the entire world. We were a mining empire. Now, about 1,000 of us live here in town. I've been here 40 years. I've been living in town 35 of those years. I live in the Virginia City Highlands now. My wife and I have a house up there, but this place, if it wasn't for Bonanza, God only knows what we'd be today. Any questions, comments?
Is there still mining happening close to here? Is that?
The last one shut down 5 years ago. I should know because I was chief of security for that mine. I'm retired law enforcement. And that mine was, we were still mining 5,000 ounces gold, 500 ounces gold, 5,000 ounces silver a week. We shut down because we were mining 5 different claims dating back to the 1860s. And those claims were pretty lucrative. But as we continued to mine them out using modern mining techniques, including use of cyanide as a leach method for the piles of ore that we had to find another ore source in order to stay vibrant. So we did find another ore source, but in order to reach it, we had to build a drift like this one. But that drift had to conform to the Mining Health and Safety Administration. So it was large as a railroad tunnel, had to be completely lined on the inside. There were safety stations set up all along the way. In order to reach it, we had to blast our way through it at $5,000 a foot. So all that money, we go all the way back to that ore source, only to discover the cost of reaching it outweighed the value of what we found. And so what do you do then? Like most mines do, you turn off the light, throw out the cat, lock the door, and leave. So it's still there. Now that gold's up over $1,900 an ounce, that may change. We'll see. At one time, little old me, I was taking $1 million in precepts to the Florida Canyon mine to be refined. I had a truck with $1 million in gold and silver precip. In other words, it needed to be smelted, but still valuable. Yeah. But worthless to anybody who tried to steal it, because they would have had to melt it at about 3,500 degrees. And most people aren't capable of that. Okay. Any questions, comments?
None whatsoever.
Well, you guys either impressed or bored. Which is it?
I'm actually I don't know about you guys, but I'm actually pretty interested.
It's hard to believe that 30,000 people once lived here.
Yeah, you can see the picture.
All right, I got a question. We're a bit of paranormal enthusiasts. So, have you seen this? Is there any stories about like ghost sightings or? Yeah.
It all started in 1850. Actually, it started in 1849. The early miners on their way to California came up Gold Canyon, and they saw placer gold, and they saw that quartz outcropping. But rather than settle down and mine it then, they were in a hurry to get to California. And so they didn't come back until 10 years later. But once they came up here and saw what was here, and that started it. Yep. And this was still a rip-roaring mining camp until about 1860. In fact, the Territorial Enterprise wrote that there were 88 violent deaths in this town before somebody spoiled it all by dying of natural causes. But by 1861, 1862, the wild and woolly days were over, because now suddenly this entire town is being built on wealth. By 1876, like I said, all the ladies in this town all wore the latest fashions from London, Paris. They were serving oysters on a half shell because the railroad would bring them up from San Francisco. And the wealth that was made here did not go back east. It went to capitalists in San Francisco because the Comstock built San Francisco. Okay. I'll follow everybody out. I got some closing comments for you. Go outside.
Okay.
You want to lead the way further?
Shorty's first.
Lead the way there, young man. And you can tell Bill when you get out there I didn't get lost.
Well, we don't really know
Just
that yet.
to show you how deep the well is, I'm going to show you give you a quick peek. See all that? It's pretty cool, huh? Well,
I kind of have a question. You said that when they had compressed air, was that before electricity?
Oh yeah.
Really? How did that?
They had pumps that were invented by the French. They were powered on the outside by steam engines.
Oh,
got here, in fact, this was the first mine to embrace electricity, and it was
Okay. Yeah, I guess I just couldn't wrap my mind around
electricity.
compressed
It's-
air.
yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Everything was steam powered,
Okay.
including those pumps I told you about
The
outside.
giant ones. Okay.
And everything that was used had to be powered by something. And so steam was the main source of power back then.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
And that's
okay.
why by 1880, 1885, there wasn't enough lumber or wood left at Lake Tahoe for a toothpick factory.
Yeah.
They used it all.
Oh, I bet clear cut it all
Okay,
around.
Pard, watch your head.
What's your name, sir?
Watch your head.
Okay.
It's like very tight and good. And I was watching Arizona trying
Yeah.
It just kept getting smaller and smaller, and I'm like, oh my god. Yeah, good.
Thank God I'm not seriously claustrophobic.
I know. Well, hell, I mean, I'm not at all, and I'm like getting a little.
Oh my
Ow.
Love in my heart, but you wouldn't have been able to do this a year ago.
Yeah, I know. I know. I would not have fit. I would have been very finicky.
Hello, bug.
They get pretty deep in there, don't they?
Yeah.
Gotta have it.
By the way, if you don't know who I am, I'm a 7-foot man in a mine that's built for people that are under 5 feet.
It's interesting you said that they used to be 7 feet, so I was gonna be like, wow, so back then you could have fit in it, eh? Sorry, I wasn't looking, I'll almost hit you. Whew, I like the end of the tunnel. Picture of the
Yeah. Tree. Yes, I do. Actually.
Well, we made it.
Here you have it, proof that there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Amen for that, sir.
Closing comments for you before you leave. Nevada is a very unique state because our past is still our present. You go east of Texas, you'll still find remnants of the original Pony Express Trail. The Immigrant Trail, where 350,000 people made that trek from east to west from 1845 until after the turn of the century. You go east of here, you'll still see places where a man's worth is still based on his ability to train a horse and to use a rope. That's how I made my living. In fact, I used to walk up to pretty girls like this and I'd say, I rode calves, man, and it's definitely like yours. That's about all I ever got out of was a laugh. That was 40 years ago. So anyway,
I'm gonna tell James that one.
the other thing that makes us unique, our two main cities are 500 miles apart. And so you have a lot of small towns in between that have to rely on their own sense of community and that community spirit that allows them to become successful in the first place, whether it be mining or whatever. And so, like Ely, Nevada, that's 285 miles from anywhere. And so when Kennecott Copper moved out, they had to reinvent themselves. And they did. And so not only have they reinvented themselves, they have become prosperous because they were willing to work together in order to survive. And so for that reason, we're very proud of our heritage and what we've been able to accomplish over the years. I'm a newcomer, I've only been here 40 years, but we've come a long way because of our ability to adapt. Because as an example, kind of hazy today, but way off in the distance, you see a faint outline of a mountain range. That is a Stillwater range that's 100 miles from here.
Wow.
So we have a lot of wide open spaces. So we're proud of who we are. Proud that one of the last free states in the West. All right, that's all I have. We tell people we may be short on water up here, but we're long on hospitality. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for keeping this open, man.
Something else you should do today. The train's not running today; they'll be running tomorrow. But take the trolley. You can catch it at the Bucket of Blood parking lot in Old Town.
Okay.
Bill runs it. I've only known him 35 years. He knows a lot about this town. He takes you through the various streets and tells you what was here back then. Very, very informative.